The salt spray kissed my face like a spectral lover, cold and persistent. Out here, miles off the coast, the lighthouse stood like a granite fist punching through the bruised twilight sky. They called it the St. Augustine's Needle, though its official designation was Station 1138. Whatever you called it, it was my new home, my sanctuary, my self-imposed exile. My name is Elias Thorne, and I came here seeking silence, the kind that only miles of churning, indifferent ocean can provide. Silence to drown out the echoes of Sarah's laughter, the crunch of metal, the sirens that followed. The job posting had been cryptic, found folded in the back of an old maritime gazette in a dusty second-hand bookstore. Keeper wanted. Remote lighthouse station. Solitary position. Excellent compensation. Discretion required. Previous experience preferred but not essential. Must adhere strictly to operational protocols. It felt like a message meant only for me, a lifeline thrown into the wreckage of my life. Old Silas, the ferryman who brought me out, had skin like cured leather and eyes that seemed to hold the grey melancholy of the sea itself. He'd barely spoken on the 2-hour journey, the chug of his ancient boat the only soundtrack besides the crying gulls. As the lighthouse loomed larger, a stark silhouette against the fading light, he finally broke the silence. "She's a lonely post, Station 1138, he'd rasped, not looking at me but at the tower. Keeps her secrets close. The last keeper?" I'd asked, needing to fill the sudden quiet. Silas spat into the waves. "Fletcher. Left sudden. Didn't even wait for his relief. Just, gone one morning. Boat missing. Folks assume he took it, headed for the mainland. Never turned up." He finally turned those sea-gray eyes on me. "Place has its ways, Mr. Thorne. Best learn 'em quick." He helped me unload my meager supplies, food for 3 months, books, clothes, a picture of Sarah, onto the slick, wave-battered landing dock at the base of the rock the lighthouse was built upon. The tower itself rose sheer above us, maybe 150 feet of weathered stone, culminating in the glass lantern room. "Keys under the mat by the main door," Silas grunted, already casting off the lines. "Generator instructions are on the panel. Main lamp needs lighting, for full dark. Never let it go out, till sunrise. Never." His gaze lingered on the tower. "And mind the foghorn schedule. Automatic, mostly, but check it daily. Especially check it. Some sounds, best keep 'em out." "What sounds?" Silas just shook his head, the engine sputtering to life. "Just mind the protocols, Mr. Thorne." Fletcher didn't. "Stick to the book." The boat pulled away, leaving me utterly alone with the immense stone needle and the sighing sea. The main door was thick oak, banded with rusted iron. Under the worn coir mat, I found a heavy, ornate brass key. The lock turned with a satisfying clunk. Inside, the air was cold, damp, thick with the smell of brine, old oil, and something else, something faintly metallic, like old blood. A spiral staircase corkscrewed upwards through the heart of the tower. The ground floor was Spartan, a small galley kitchen, a storage area with fuel drums, and a heavy, bolted door that presumably led to the lower foundations or sea caves beneath the rock. A faded sign tacked to it read, "Level 0, authorized personnel only, danger." I hauled my gear up the winding stairs. The keeper's living quarters were 2 levels below the lantern room, a cramped circular space with a bunk, a small desk bolted to the curved wall, a wood-burning stove, and a few built-in shelves. It was basic, functional, and utterly solitary. Just what I needed. Or so I told myself. On the desk lay a thick, leather-bound logbook and a typed sheet of paper titled, Station 1138, Keeper Protocols and Safety Procedures. I scanned it quickly. Most were standard operational details: generator maintenance, lamp upkeep, weather reporting via the crackly shortwave radio. But interspersed were stranger directives. Protocol 7, the main lamp must be lit precisely 15 minutes before official sunset and extinguished precisely 15 minutes after official sunrise. Timing is critical. Deviation is not permitted. Protocol 12, daily foghorn diagnostic check at 1,400 hours sharp. Ensure automated system is operational. Auditory integrity is paramount. Protocol 19, access to level 0 is strictly forbidden outside of documented emergencies and requires mainland authorization. Structural instability. Protocol 23, during periods of heavy fog or storm, if non-standard auditory phenomena are detected, e.g., sounds not consistent with foghorn, waves, or wind, log the occurrence but do not investigate externally. Secure all hatches and remain within levels 1 to 4. Protocol 28, never extinguish the main lamp during the hours of darkness, regardless of observed phenomena or perceived malfunction. The light must remain constant. Non-standard auditory phenomena. Observed phenomena. The language was sterile, bureaucratic, but the implications sent a shiver down my spine. Fletcher didn't stick to the book, Silas had said. With the sun bleeding into the horizon, I climbed the final flights of stairs to the lantern room. The Fresnel lens was a magnificent, intricate thing of brass and glass, dominating the circular chamber. Following the yellowed instruction card, I fired up the main lamp. A low hum filled the room as the massive bulb ignited, casting a powerful, searching beam out into the deepening twilight. Protocol 7, check. Back in my quarters, I made a simple meal, the silence broken only by the rhythmic whoosh of the rotating lamp above and the distant crash of waves below. Later, sitting at the desk, I opened the logbook. Fletcher's handwriting filled the recent pages. Mostly routine entries, weather conditions, fuel levels, passing ships sighted. But sprinkled among them were odder notes. October 12th, heavy fog. Horn functioning. Heard, singing. Faint. Like from the water. Wind patterns likely. October 19th, storm surge. Waves hitting level 0 hatch. Strange echoes from below during high tide. Must check foundations when weather clears. October 25th, thick fog again. Distinct rhythmic tapping on lantern room glass around 0300. Too high for birds. Intense. Stopped after 10 minutes. Did not investigate per Protocol 23. November 2nd, calm seas. Clear night. Saw lights under the water. Moving erratically. Not bioluminescence. Too structured. Logged. November 7th, generator acting up. Needs new filter. Also, scratching. Definitely scratching. From the level 0 door. Animal. How? Fletcher's last entry was dated November 10th, fog thicker than I've ever seen. Can't see the rocks below. Horn sounds, wrong. Distorted. Echoing back from somewhere it shouldn't. And the scratching, it stopped. That's worse somehow. Need to check the boat in the morning. Feeling watched. After that, Blank pages. I closed the book, my hand trembling slightly. Isolation plays tricks on the mind. Fletcher was probably stressed, hearing things, seeing things. Structural instability, Protocol 19 said about level 0. Probably just the sea working its way into old foundations, causing echoes, attracting animals. Rational explanations. Always rational explanations. I prepared for bed, the routine a small comfort. Checked the generator readouts, secured the main door hatch, banked the fire in the stove. Outside, the wind had picked up, whistling around the tower. The waves crashed with more ferocity against the rocks below. I drew the thick curtains across the narrow windows, plunging the small room into near darkness, lit only by the faint glow of the stove's embers and the rhythmic sweep of the lamp's beam filtering down from above. Sleep came slowly. The tower seemed alive with groans and creaks. The wind howled like a hungry beast. I thought of Fletcher's notes, of Silas's warning. Non-standard auditory phenomena. Then, sometime deep in the night, I heard it. Distinctly, unmistakably, over the wind and waves. Not from outside. Not from above. From below. A low, guttural scraping sound. Metal on stone. Coming from behind the bolted door of level 0. It repeated. Slow. Deliberate. Like something heavy being dragged across the floor in the forbidden darkness beneath my feet. My breath hitched. Rational thought warred with primal fear. Rats? Silas hadn't mentioned vermin, but it was possible. An old lighthouse, stone foundations meeting the sea, prime real estate for rodents. But the sound, it was too heavy, too rhythmic for rats. It sounded like effort. Purposeful. Scrape, drag, pause. Then again. Scrape, drag, pause. It seemed to emanate directly from beneath the small circular rug in the center of my floor. Level 0. Structural instability. Danger. Protocol 19 screamed in my mind. Protocol 23 echoed it, do not investigate externally. Secure all hatches. My hatch was secure. The level 0 door was floors below me, bolted from this side. Whatever was down there was contained. Still, the noise grated on my nerves, each scrape vibrating faintly through the stone floor, up through the legs of my bunk. I thought of Fletcher's last entry. Scratching, from the level 0 door. Animal? How? Had he heard this? Was this what drove him to flee? No. Stay rational. It's an old structure. The sea works its way in. Tides shift things. Debris caught in the foundations, moving with the swell. Perfectly logical. The storm last night could have lodged something new down there. I forced myself to lie still, listening to the rhythmic scrape below, the howl of the wind outside, and the steady, reassuring sweep of the lamp mechanism above. Eventually, the scraping stopped, fading into the background noise of the storm-tossed sea. Exhaustion finally claimed me, pulling me into a shallow, uneasy sleep filled with dreams of dark water and things scratching behind unseen doors. Dawn broke gray and turbulent. The storm hadn't fully passed, though the wind had lessened. Rain still lashed against the windows. My first act, even before coffee, was to check the level 0 door on the ground floor. The heavy bolts were firmly in place, untouched. Dust lay thick around the edges, undisturbed. There were no fresh marks on the wood, no sign that anything had tried to get out. Relief washed over me, though it felt thin, brittle. I checked the exterior hatches, peering down at the churning sea crashing against the rocks. Nothing seemed out of place. My routine took over. Generator check, running smoothly, fuel levels adequate. Main lamp diagnostic, operational. Extinguished precisely 15 minutes after sunrise, per Protocol 7. Shortwave radio check, crackling static, but the weather channel came through faintly. Logbook entry, heavy rain, high seas. Auditory disturbance noted approximate 0230 to 0315, originating level 0. Suspect tidal debris in foundations. No external signs. Keep it factual. Keep it rational. The day passed in a blur of mundane tasks. Cleaning the lantern lens, polishing the brass, checking supplies, reading. Yet, the unease lingered. Every creak of the tower, every slap of a wave against the rock felt amplified, potentially sinister. I found myself glancing at the level 0 door every time I passed it. At 1,400 hours, I performed the foghorn check as mandated by Protocol 12. Climbing to the small platform just below the lantern room where the horn mechanism was housed, I ran the diagnostic. The compressed air hissed, building pressure. Then, the blast. A deep, resonant wah that shook the very stone beneath my feet, rolling out over the turbulent gray water. It sounded correct. Powerful. Normal. Auditory integrity is paramount. Why? What sounds was it meant to ensure integrity against? Fletcher's note about the horn sounding wrong, distorted, echoed in my mind. Later that afternoon, staring out from the lantern room gallery rail, the rain had finally stopped, leaving a heavy mist. I saw something. Just a flicker of movement on the churning surface of the sea, maybe half a mile out. Too large for a seabird. Too sleek for debris. A seal? Possibly. But it moved with an odd, almost geometric precision, a straight line cutting briefly through the swell before vanishing again. Probably nothing. My tired eyes playing tricks. As dusk approached, preparing to light the lamp, I paused, rereading Fletcher's final entries and the official protocols. Protocol 28, never extinguish the main lamp during the hours of darkness, regardless of observed phenomena or perceived malfunction. Why state the obvious so emphatically? Lighthouses existed to shine at night. And observed phenomena? What phenomena? 15 minutes before sunset, the lamp hummed back to life, its beam cutting into the gathering gloom and swirling mist. I drew the curtains in my quarters, the memory of last night's scraping making the small room feel both claustrophobic and terribly exposed. I tried to read, but the words blurred. Every gust of wind sounded like a footstep on the stairs. Every creak of the stove seemed like a whisper. I kept listening for the scraping from below, but tonight, there was only the sea and the wind. Around 10 p.m., the shortwave radio crackled unexpectedly. Not static, but a voice. Faint, distorted by distance and interference. Station 1138, do you read? Repeat, Station 1138, acknowledge. Coast Guard cutter stalwart requesting dash, the signal abruptly cut out, dissolving into static. Odd. The Coast Guard usually scheduled check-ins. An unscheduled call. I went to the radio unit near the desk, fiddling with the knobs, trying to reacquire the signal. Nothing but hiss. Maybe atmospheric conditions. Maybe they were just passing out of range. I logged it, 2,207 hours, unidentified transmission, possible USCG stalwart, cut off mid-request. Unable to reacquire signal. Returning to my bunk, I glanced at the photo of Sarah on the small shelf. Her smile felt like a memory from another lifetime. Coming here was supposed to bring peace, a quiet place to grieve. Instead, my nerves felt frayed, my senses on high alert. This wasn't silence, it was a waiting quiet, thick with unspoken possibilities. Just as I was drifting into sleep, another sound began. Not the scraping from below. This was higher up. Much higher. A soft, rhythmic tap-tap-tapping. Coming from the lantern room glass, far above my head. Tap, tap, tap. Consistent. Measured. Exactly like Fletcher's log described. My blood ran cold. I sat bolt upright in the bunk, straining to hear over the wind. Tap, tap, tap. It continued, steady and insistent. Too high for birds, Fletcher had written. He was right. We were 150 feet up. No bird taps rhythmically like that in the dark, in the wind, against thick lantern glass. Protocol 23, do not investigate externally. Secure all hatches and remain within levels 1 to 4. My hatches were secure. I was levels below the lantern room. There was nothing I could do. Nothing I should do. Tap, tap, tap. But the sound burrowed under my skin. What could possibly be up there, tapping on the glass, 150 feet above the raging sea? The rational explanations felt weaker now, stretched thin by the relentless, inexplicable rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. Then, abruptly, it stopped. The sudden silence was almost louder than the tapping had been. I waited, holding my breath, listening to the wind and the waves and the pounding of my own heart. Minutes passed. The tapping did not return. I lay back down, pulling the rough blanket up to my chin, eyes wide in the dark, staring at the unseen ceiling. The isolation of the lighthouse pressed in, no longer a comfort, but a suffocating weight. Fletcher had logged the tapping, followed the protocols, and disappeared days later. What had he done differently? What rule had he broken? And what, exactly, was tapping on the glass at the top of the world? Sleep offered no escape. When I finally drifted off, it was into a restless state filled with images of tapping fingers, vast empty oceans, and heavy doors scraping open in darkness. I woke before dawn, muscles aching, the memory of the rhythmic tapping on the lantern glass echoing in my mind as clearly as if it were still happening. The morning routine felt like a shield against the encroaching strangeness. Generator, lamp, radio check, logbook entry. I kept the entry brief, tapping disturbance noted approximate 23:45 to 00:15, originating lantern room exterior. Consistent with previous keeper's logs. Ceased spontaneously. No investigation conducted per Protocol 23. The weather had calmed considerably. The sea was still rough, a choppy gray expanse under an overcast sky, but the violent energy of the storm had passed. Mist clung in patches, obscuring the horizon. As I did my rounds, checking the exterior walkways below the lantern room, I scanned the water, half expecting to see those strange lights Fletcher mentioned, or the sleek shape I thought I'd glimpsed yesterday. Nothing. Only waves and mist. Back on the ground floor, I found myself drawn again to the level 0 door. I ran my hand over the cold, bolted wood. The dust remained undisturbed. But as I crouched for a closer look, something caught my eye, wedged into the tiny gap between the bottom of the door and the stone threshold. It was minuscule, almost invisible. A tiny shard, dark and chitinous, like a fragment of beetle shell, but thicker, harder. It certainly wasn't metal or wood. Where could it have come from? Had it been blown in by the storm? Or had it come from inside? Carefully, using the tip of my pocket knife, I pried it loose and examined it. It was brittle, snapping easily between my fingers, leaving a faint, unpleasant metallic tang on my skin. I wrapped the larger fragment in a tissue and tucked it into my pocket, logging it mentally but unsure how to phrase it for the official record without sounding unhinged. Small, unidentified fragment found near level 0 threshold. Organic/mineral. Origin unknown. Too speculative. I decided against logging it for now. Midday brought another routine task, checking the fuel reserves in the storage area next to the galley. The large drums were secure, levels satisfactory. But as I finished checking the gauges, I noticed something odd about the far wall, the stone wall that formed the inner curve of the tower's base. Low down, near the floor, was a patch of dampness that hadn't been there yesterday. It wasn't large, maybe the size of a dinner plate, and it seemed to seep faintly from the mortar between the massive stone blocks. Condensation. Possible, especially after the storm. But this part of the tower was usually bone dry. I touched the damp patch, the water was icy cold, far colder than the ambient air, and felt oddly viscous. Almost oily. And the faint metallic smell I'd noticed earlier was stronger here. I made a note to check it again tomorrow, to see if it spread. At 1,400 hours, the foghorn diagnostic. Standing on the platform, I initiated the sequence. The familiar hiss of compressed air, then nothing. No blast. My pulse quickened. I ran the diagnostic again. Hiss, silence. Auditory integrity is paramount. Protocol 12. Silas's warning, mind the foghorn schedule. Especially check it. Fletcher's note, horn sounds, wrong. Distorted. Panic tightened my chest. A malfunctioning foghorn in this remote, often fog-bound location was a serious safety hazard. But Protocol 12 didn't specify what to do in case of failure, only to check it. I consulted the main protocol sheet again. Nothing specific about horn repair, only general maintenance procedures. I tried the manual override. Pulled the heavy lever. A weak, strangled fut sound, like the air escaping a punctured tire, but no proper blast. Something was definitely wrong. Blockage in the lines. A leak in the pressure tank. I spent the next hour tracing the air lines, checking valves, inspecting the compressor unit housed near the generator. Everything looked normal. No obvious leaks, no damage. Yet, the pressure wouldn't build properly for a full blast. Frustrated and increasingly anxious, I radioed the mainland base, hoping the atmospheric conditions had improved. Mainland base, this is station 1138, do you copy? Static. Mainland base, station 1138, requesting assistance, foghorn non-operational. Repeat, foghorn non-operational. Do you read? Only the crackle and hiss of an empty channel answered. Defeated for the moment, I logged the malfunction, 1,400 hours, foghorn diagnostic failed. Manual override failed. Unable to produce audible signal. Pressure system appears compromised, cause undetermined. Unable to contact mainland base. The rest of the afternoon felt charged with a new tension. A silent lighthouse was a vulnerable one. A silent foghorn, even more so. What sounds was it meant to keep out, as Silas had cryptically implied? As sunset approached, I climbed to the lantern room. The lamp ignited without issue, its powerful beam sweeping out into the twilight, a lone sentinel against the encroaching night. But without the horn's deep voice, the light felt incomplete, almost fragile. Night fell heavy and moonless. The cloud cover remained thick, and a light drizzle began to patter against the lantern glass. I sat in my quarters, the logbook open, Fletcher's increasingly erratic entries seeming less like the ramblings of an isolated man and more like prescient warnings. Saw lights under the water. Scratching. Horn sounds wrong. Feeling watched. I kept the curtains drawn tight. Tried to read, but found myself listening intently to the sounds of the tower and the sea. Listening for the scraping below. Listening for the tapping above. Around midnight, a new sound began. Faint at first, almost subliminal beneath the drizzle and the waves. A low, resonant humming. It wasn't the generator, that was a deeper, more mechanical rumble. This was different. Almost musical, but deeply dissonant, like a vast, untuned string being plucked far away. It seemed to come from the sea itself, vibrating up through the rock, through the stone of the tower. I went to the narrow window, hesitating with my hand on the curtain. Protocol 23 applied to non-standard auditory phenomena, but specifically warned against investigating externally. Looking out the window, was that external? Protocol 4 said keep curtains drawn from sunset to sunrise. A subtle distinction, perhaps, but one my frayed nerves seized upon. I wasn't going outside. Slowly, carefully, I pulled back the edge of the thick curtain, just an inch, peering out into the blackness. The drizzle distorted the view, blurring the faint sweep of the lamp beam on the nearby waves. The humming continued, seeming to rise and fall in pitch, creating a nauseating, discordant thrum. And then I saw them. Just as Fletcher described. Lights beneath the water. Not the scattered pinpricks of bioluminescence. These were larger, steadier orbs of cold, blue-green light, moving in deliberate, complex patterns deep below the surface. They shifted and coalesced, forming geometric shapes, triangles, circles, spirals, before dispersing and reforming. It was mesmerizing, hypnotic, and utterly unnatural. I watched, forgetting the cold seeping through the glass, forgetting the protocols. What could create such lights, moving with such intelligence, deep in the hostile ocean? Submersibles. Unlikely, out here, moving like that. Some unknown marine life. Possible, but... As I watched, one of the larger orbs detached itself from the pattern and began to rise, directly towards the lighthouse rock. It ascended slowly, growing brighter, clearer, resolving into not just a light, but something with substance behind it. Something vast and dark moving just beneath the surface, pushing the glowing orb before it. My breath caught. The orb reached the base of the rock, pulsed once, brightly, then extinguished. Leaving only the churning black water. And the low, dissonant humming that now seemed to be coming not just from the sea, but from the very rock beneath my feet. It was inside the foundations. It was in level 0. I stumbled back from the window, heart hammering against my ribs. The curtain fell back into place, plunging the room into its familiar dimness, but the image of the rising, extinguishing light, and the vast dark shape beneath it, was burned into my mind. And the humming, it wasn't just below me anymore. It was in the tower, a low-frequency vibration that resonated in my bones, making my teeth ache. It felt like the entire structure was thrumming with some unseen energy. Level 0. The light had gone out right at the base of the rock. Whatever was down there, whatever Fletcher had heard scratching, whatever dragged heavy objects across the stone floor, was now humming. Generating light. My earlier rationalizations felt laughably inadequate. Tidal debris didn't glow. Animals didn't hum in discordant harmony. Something else was down there. Something ancient, perhaps, disturbed by the recent storm, or something drawn here by the lighthouse itself. Scrape. The sound jolted me, sharp and sudden after the pervasive hum. It came from the ground floor again, from the level 0 door. But this wasn't the slow, dragging noise from the first night. This was faster, more frantic. Like claws scrabbling desperately against the thick oak. Scrape, scratch, scrape. It was trying to get out. My mind raced. Secure all hatches. Protocol 23. The door was bolted. It was thick oak, banded with iron. Surely it would hold. But the sheer panic in the sound, the force implied by the frantic scratching. The humming intensified, weaving through the scratching sounds, the two noises creating a sickening auditory tapestry. I backed away from the center of the room, pressing myself against the cold, curved stone wall, eyes fixed on the floor as if I could see through it to the horror below. How long could this go on? What happened if it broke through? The ground floor was just storage, the galley, but the spiral staircase led straight up. To me. I gripped the small pocketknife I carried, its handle slick with sweat. A pathetic defense against, what? Claws that could scrabble on solid oak. A presence that could generate light and hum through solid rock. Then, as suddenly as it began, the scratching stopped. The humming abruptly cut off. Silence slammed back in, thick and heavy, broken only by the drizzle outside and the whirring lamp mechanism above. I didn't move for a long time, listening. Had it given up? Or had it found another way? My eyes darted to the damp patch on the wall near the fuel drums, the memory of that cold, oily seepage unsettling me further. Was the tower itself becoming porous to whatever lay beneath? Sleep was impossible now. I stayed dressed, sitting rigid on the edge of the bunk, knife in hand, straining to hear any further sound from level 0. The rest of the night passed in nerve-wracking silence. Morning arrived, gray and damp. Exhausted but wired, I forced myself through the routine. The main lamp switched off, its duty done. Downstairs, the level 0 door remained bolted, seemingly undisturbed, though the dust near the threshold looked slightly more scattered than before. Subjective? Maybe. The damp patch on the wall hadn't spread noticeably, but the faint metallic smell seemed stronger. My priority was the foghorn. A silent horn felt like an invitation to something. I tried the diagnostics again. Nothing. Manual override. Nothing. I spent another hour examining the mechanism, the tanks, the lines, finding no obvious fault. It was maddening. How could it just stop working? Desperate, I tried the radio again. Mainland base, station 1138. Foghorn non-operational. Request immediate technical guidance. Do you copy? To my astonishment, a voice answered, faint but clearer than last night. Tyan 1138, read you faint, Pete, Horn, Tyanal. Mainland base, confirm. Foghorn is non-operational. Pressure system failure, cause unknown. Request instructions. Stand by, other front moving, assistance delayed. 4 hours, temp repair, safe limits, repeat, safe limits. Do not, protocol deviation. Fletcher. The signal dissolved into static again, cutting off mid-sentence. 48 hours. Assistance delayed. Attempt repair within safe limits. Do not engage in protocol deviation. And they mentioned Fletcher. Had he tried to fix something he shouldn't have? Had a repair attempt led him to break protocol? Access level 0, perhaps. Safe limits. What were the safe limits for repairing a complex pneumatic horn system I knew nothing about, alone, on a rock miles from anywhere? Still, I had to try. For the next few hours, I immersed myself in the technical manuals I found in the storage room, trying to understand the foghorn's workings. It was complex, involving compressors, accumulators, timing mechanisms. I checked everything accessible above level 0, cleaning contacts, tightening fittings, bleeding air lines. Nothing worked. The pressure gauge stubbornly refused to climb into the operational zone. The only components I hadn't accessed were the main pressure reservoir and potentially some backup systems indicated on a faded schematic, located, in level 0. The thought sent a fresh wave of anxiety through me. Protocol 19, access strictly forbidden. Fletcher's disappearance. The scratching. The humming. The lights. Coincidence? Frustrated, I abandoned the horn repairs for the moment. My head throbbed with lack of sleep. I needed to clear my thoughts. I climbed back up to the lantern room gallery, hoping the fresh sea air would help. The mist had partially lifted, revealing a wider expanse of gray, choppy water. I scanned the horizon, the rocks below. And then I saw it again. That sleek, dark shape in the water, closer this time, maybe only a few hundred yards out. It surfaced briefly, long, segmented, something that glinted wetly like polished carapace, before submerging again with barely a ripple. Far too large for a seal. Not the shape of any whale I knew. My hand went to the pocket knife. It felt impossibly small. As I watched the spot where it had vanished, another movement caught my eye. Down on the landing dock, the small concrete platform at the base of the rock where Silas had dropped me off. Something was scrambling up from the water's edge onto the dock itself. It was pale, stick-thin, moving with a jerky, unnatural gait, like a broken marionette. Long, spindly limbs, naked despite the cold. Its head lolled at an impossible angle. Even from this distance, I could tell something was terribly wrong with it. It paused on the dock, skeletal fingers twitching, then began to crawl, impossibly, sickeningly, up the sheer rock face towards the lighthouse tower itself. It moved like an insect, finding impossible handholds, its pale limbs stark against the dark, wet stone. And it was heading directly for the main door hatch on the ground floor. Frozen on the gallery rail, I watched the pale figure ascend. Its movements were sickeningly fluid, defying gravity as it scaled the wet rock. There was no rational explanation for how it clung to the sheer surface, no purchase visible for those skeletal limbs. It was impossibly thin, joints bending at unnatural angles, its lolling head suggesting a broken neck, yet it moved with relentless purpose. My first instinct was to rush down, to secure the main door hatch. But was it already locked? I'd bolted it last night, yes, but had I checked it this morning after going outside? My sleep-deprived brain struggled to recall the exact sequence of my routine. Even if it was bolted, could this thing bypass it? Protocol 23 flashed again, remain within levels 1 to 4. Going down to the ground floor, level 1, felt like descending into the jaws of the threat. But staying up here felt like waiting passively for it to breach the tower's defenses. The figure reached the small metal platform outside the main hatch. It paused, its back to me, head still hanging limp. Slowly, agonizingly, its head began to lift, rotating on its neck with a faint clicking sound that carried eerily on the wind. It wasn't looking at the door. It was looking up, directly towards the lantern room gallery where I stood exposed. I recoiled, ducking behind the metal railing, heart pounding. Had it seen me? Did it know I was watching? Its face, even glimpsed from that distance, was horrifying, gaunt, pale, stretched thin over sharp bones, with eyes like empty sockets, yet somehow fixed on me. Silence stretched, broken only by the wind and the slap of waves. I risked another look. It was no longer looking up. It was crouched by the main hatch door, its long, pale fingers probing the edges, the handle, the hinges. It moved with a disturbing curiosity, like an animal examining unfamiliar prey. Clang! The sound echoed up the tower shaft. It had struck the metal hatch, not with force, but experimentally. Clang! Clang! Louder now. Testing the integrity. Then came a sound that chilled me more than any scraping or tapping, a high-pitched, ululating whine, like wind whistling through bone, emanating from the figure itself. It wasn't a sound of pain or anger, but of communication. Or perhaps just a sound it made, like the buzzing of an insect. I backed away from the railing, retreating into the lantern room itself. The thick glass felt like scant protection. I had to get downstairs, barricade myself in my quarters, follow the protocols. Descending the spiral stairs, each footstep seemed thunderous. The whining sound from outside persisted, a background drone to my panicked thoughts. Reaching my quarters, level 3, I slammed the heavy wooden door shut and threw the bolt. It felt flimsy. I looked around the small, circular room for anything to barricade it with. The desk was bolted down. The bunk was built in. There was nothing. I sank onto the bunk, knife clutched in my fist, listening. The whining outside continued. Was it trying the windows? I couldn't tell. My quarters were 2 levels below the lantern room, but still high above the ground floor hatch it had been probing. How could it reach these windows? Then, the humming started again. Low, dissonant, vibrating up through the floor from level 0. It intertwined with the high-pitched whine from outside, creating a nauseating harmony that seemed to press in on my skull. Were they connected? The thing climbing the tower and the presence below? My gaze fell on the logbook, open on the desk. Fletcher's words swam before my eyes. Feeling watched. I was being watched. Stalked. This wasn't random. The whining outside abruptly stopped. The humming from below continued, steady and low. I held my breath, listening. Footsteps. No. A faint scraping, different from before. Closer. Coming from the stairwell. Impossible. The main hatch was floors below. How could it be inside? Scrape, click, scrape. It sounded like it was on the spiral staircase, ascending slowly from the ground floor. Had it found another way in? Had it breached the hatch while I was barricading myself, My blood turned to ice. I was trapped in my quarters, high up the tower, with something inhuman climbing towards me. The bolted door felt utterly inadequate. I looked wildly around the room. The stove poker. Useless. The heavy logbook. Pathetic. The scraping grew louder, closer. It was just outside my door now. Scrape, drag, accompanied by that faint, clicking sound its neck had made. I pressed myself back against the curved wall, raising the small knife, utterly terrified. The doorknob began to turn, slowly, testing the bolt. Then came a soft, almost polite tapping on the wood. Not the frantic scrabbling from level 0, not the rhythmic tapping on the lantern glass. Just a simple tap tap tap. Like a visitor. "Mr. Thorne." A voice whispered through the door. Hoarse, dry, barely human. "Are you in there, Mr. Thorne?" Fletcher wasn't very welcoming. "Are you?" My throat closed, the knife feeling like a toothpick in my suddenly numb hand. It knew my name. It knew Fletcher. Its voice was a dry rustle, like dead leaves skittering across pavement, carrying an undercurrent of something ancient and desiccated. Fletcher wasn't welcoming, the voice rasped again, closer to the door now, almost intimate. He learned the protocols. Admirable adherence. For a time. But curiosity, such a human failing. "Did he tell you about the lights, Mr. Thorne? Or the singing from the water?" I remained pressed against the stone, silent, trying to control the raggedness of my breathing. Answering felt like acknowledging its presence, giving it a foothold in my reality. A faint scratching began on the door, not the frantic scrabbling from below, but the delicate, exploratory tracing of a single, sharp point, a fingernail. A claw. It moved slowly over the wood, mapping the surface. "He tried to fix the horn, you know," the voice continued, conversational, chillingly mundane. "Went places he shouldn't have. Heard things he shouldn't have. Saw, well. You understand. Boundaries, Mr. Thorne. They exist for a reason. Some doors are best left closed." The scratching stopped directly over the bolt. Like this one. A sudden, sharp crack echoed as splintered wood flew inwards from around the bolt housing. The entity had struck the door, not with brute force, but with focused, surgical precision. The bolt held, but the wood around it was visibly weakened. Fear gave way to a surge of desperate anger. "Get away from the door!" I shouted, surprised by the volume of my own voice. A dry chuckle answered me. "Ah, there you are. Not entirely unwelcoming, then. Just cautious. Wise." Fletcher was not wise, in the end. He thought the light kept things out. A fundamental misunderstanding. The scratching resumed, faster now, near the hinges. "The light only shows them the way, Mr. Thorne. It calls to them. A beacon in the dark. And the horn is meant to keep certain frequencies clear. An empty channel. When it falls silent." The voice trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. Suddenly, the low humming from level 0 returned. Not subtly, as before, but with a rapidly escalating intensity. The stone floor beneath my feet vibrated strongly now, the air filled with that dissonant, nauseating thrum. It was far louder than it had been last night, drowning out the sound of the wind and waves. Outside the door, the scratching stopped. The entity fell silent. I could hear, even through the thick wood and the overpowering hum, a change in its presence. A stillness. Was it listening? The humming swelled, becoming almost painful, a physical pressure against my eardrums. It felt like the entire base of the tower was resonating like a massive, discordant tuning fork. Then, the entity outside my door made a sound unlike anything before, a sharp, guttural hiss, full of static and something that sounded like tearing fabric. It wasn't directed at me. It sounded like a response, an angry response, to the hum vibrating up from below. I heard a distinct thud against the door, as if it had thrown itself back or been pushed. Then, rapid, skittering sounds, retreating down the spiral staircase, accompanied by that static-filled hissing. It was leaving. Fleeing. The skittering faded, swallowed by the overwhelming hum from level 0. I was alone again in my bolted room. But the relief was fleeting, immediately replaced by a different kind of dread. The entity that had climbed the tower, that knew my name, that spoke of Fletcher, had seemingly been driven away by the intensifying phenomenon from the forbidden level below. I wasn't safe. I was trapped between two unknown, hostile forces. And the one beneath my feet was growing stronger. The floor vibrated intensely now, the humming of physical force shaking the very structure of the lighthouse. Small items on the shelves rattled. Dust trickled from the mortar between the ceiling stones. Level 0. What had Fletcher seen? What was down there, generating this power, this sound, driving away the pale climber? And what would happen when the humming reached its crescendo? The tower felt like it was about to tear itself apart. The vibrations were no longer subtle. The stone floor pulsed beneath my boots, a sickening, low-frequency thrum that made my vision blur. The humming drilled into my skull, no longer just a sound but a tangible pressure. Loose mortar rained down from the ceiling in fine streams. The small wood-burning stove rattled violently, its iron door clanging against the frame. Level 0 wasn't just humming, it felt like it was awakening. Like some vast, ancient machine spooling up, or a colossal heart beating out of rhythm deep within the rock. Was this the structural instability mentioned in Protocol 19? Was the tower itself about to fail? My bolted door offered no comfort. If the tower came down, the bolt meant nothing. Staying here felt like waiting in a tomb. But where could I go? Downstairs? Towards the source of the vibration, towards the bolted door that held back, whatever it was? Towards the main hatch where the pale climber might still linger? Unthinkable. Upstairs. Towards the lantern room. It felt marginally safer, higher up, further from the epicenter of the hum. But Protocol 23 warned to remain within levels 1 to 4. The lantern room was level 5. Was there a reason for that limitation? Was the top of the tower somehow more exposed, more dangerous during these events? The humming shifted, a new layer weaving into the cacophony, a high-pitched, harmonic whine, like stressed metals singing just before it snaps. The vibrations intensified, shaking the bunk bed against the wall. The picture of Sarah vibrated off its shelf, crashing to the floor, the glass shattering. A wave of dizziness washed over me. The air felt thick, heavy, charged with static electricity that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. And the smell, that faint metallic tang I'd noticed earlier, was back, stronger now, acrid, like ozone and old blood, seeping up through the floorboards, through the very stone itself. I staggered towards the desk, grabbing it for support. My eyes fell on the logbook again, Fletcher's last entry. Fog thicker than I've ever seen. Horn sounds wrong. Scratching stopped. Feeling watched. The scratching had stopped for him too, just before the end. Was this humming, this vibration, the next stage? I had to get out of this room. Upwards seemed the only viable, if potentially protocol-breaking, option. Bracing myself against the vibrating walls, I unbolted the door and peered out into the spiral stairwell. The humming filled the narrow shaft, echoing, amplifying. Looking down, I saw nothing but darkness, but the vibrations felt stronger emanating from below. Looking up, the stairs wound towards the dim light filtering down from the lantern room access hatch. It felt like climbing towards the lesser of two evils. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out onto the stairs, pulling the door shut behind me, though I didn't bother bolting it. If the tower was coming apart, a bolt wouldn't matter. I started climbing, hand gripping the cold metal railing, each step jarring my already aching teeth. As I ascended past level 4, heading towards the lantern room, the nature of the vibration changed. It felt less like a deep shaking from below and more like the air itself was trembling. The high-pitched whine became more prominent, seeming to resonate directly with the metal structure of the upper stairs and the lantern room housing. Reaching the hatch to the lantern room, I pushed it open and scrambled inside, pulling it shut beneath me. The huge Fresnel lens dominated the space, seemingly inert, though the powerful lamp inside continued its steady rotation, its beam slicing through the misty darkness outside. The humming was different up here, sharper, purer, almost deafeningly loud, vibrating through the metal floor and the glass panels. I moved cautiously towards the glass, compelled despite my fear. What was happening out there? Was the source of the humming visible? I stayed low, remembering the pale figure looking up at me earlier, peering over the edge of the metal catwalk surrounding the lens mechanism. The mist swirled thick outside, illuminated by the sweeping beam. The sea below was a chaos of white-capped waves. The humming seemed to peak, a piercing, resonant frequency that made the glass around me hum in sympathy. And then I saw it. Reflected in the massive, curved panels of the Fresnel lens, multiplied and distorted into 100 swirling images. The lights. Not just below the water this time. Orbs of that same cold, blue-green light were rising out of the sea, hovering in the misty air around the lighthouse rock like malevolent will-o'-the-wisps. Dozens of them. They pulsed in time with the humming emanating from level 0, a silent, luminous chorus. And behind them, rising slowly, impossibly from the churning depths, came the source. A vast, dark structure, no, not a structure, a form. Immense, cyclopean, geometric in a way that defied natural shapes. Covered in something that looked like wet, black chitin, glinting where the lamp beam struck it. It rose higher and higher, dwarfing the lighthouse rock, dwarfing the tower itself. It wasn't solid, exactly, parts seemed to shift and flow like solidified shadow, absorbing the light. And embedded within its impossible form, like cold, dead eyes, were more of those blue-green orbs. This was the source of the humming. This was what lay beneath the waves. This was what level 0 somehow connected to. My mind buckled, unable to process the scale, the sheer alien wrongness of the thing emerging from the sea. As it rose, the humming from level 0 abruptly stopped. Silence crashed back in, absolute and terrifying. The hovering lights around the tower extinguished simultaneously. The colossal form hung motionless in the mist for a heartbeat. Then, with agonizing slowness, one part of its vast, shadowy mass detached, elongated, and began to snake towards the lantern room. Towards the light. Towards me. It wasn't solid, more like a tendril of living darkness, blotting out the mist as it approached the glass, obscuring the beam of the lamp itself. I scrambled backwards, falling against the central lens mechanism, unable to tear my eyes away from the encroaching shadow. This was it. This was the observed phenomena Protocol 28 warned against. This was why the light must never go out. It didn't keep them out. It drew them in. The tendril of darkness reached the glass. There was no impact, no sound. It simply phased through, flowing into the lantern room like sentient smoke, chilling the air instantly, extinguishing the mighty lamp bulb not with force, but by smothering its light, plunging the top of the tower into absolute, bone-chilling blackness. Absolute darkness. Colder than the sea wind, colder than the damp stone. The sudden absence of the lamp's powerful glow was profoundly disorienting, leaving only the faint, rhythmic swish of the now useless rotating mechanism above and the patter of drizzle against the glass. The tendril of shadow that had flowed through the glass wasn't just blocking the light, it felt like it was eating it, absorbing all ambient photons, creating a pocket of perfect blackness within the already dark lantern room. I scrambled further back, pressing myself against the intricate brasswork of the lens pedestal, the metal icy against my cheek. My knife felt useless, forgotten in my hand. How do you fight sentient darkness? The acrid smell of ozone and old blood intensified, accompanied by a faint, multi-layered whispering that seemed to emanate from the shadow itself, too low and complex to decipher, like 1,000 dry voices murmuring secrets just beyond the edge of hearing. I could sense it moving, though I saw nothing. A subtle shift in the already cold air, a displacement of the utter blackness. It flowed around the lens, exploring the confines of the lantern room with a terrifying, silent deliberation. Was it searching for me? Or was it merely examining its new environment? The whispering seemed to intensify slightly as it passed near the hatch leading down the stairs. Minutes stretched into an eternity, each second thick with suffocating dread. I stayed utterly still, trying to breathe shallowly, silently, terrified that any sound, any movement, would draw its attention. The cold deepened, seeping into my bones, a preternatural chill that had nothing to do with the night air. Then, cutting through the whispering darkness, came a new sound. From the stairwell below. Click, scrape. Distinctly different from the heavy dragging or frantic scrabbling I'd heard before. This was lighter, faster, yet still jarringly unnatural. The sound of sharp points on metal. Click click scrape, click. It was ascending the spiral staircase. Rapidly. Was it the pale climber? Had it returned now that the overpowering hum from level 0 had ceased? Or was this something else entirely, something drawn up from level 0 by the sudden silence and darkness? The tendril of shadow in the lantern room paused its silent exploration. The whispering faded slightly. Could it hear the approach from below? Did these entities interact? Compete? Click scrape clack. Whatever was climbing was nearing the top of the stairs, just below the hatch I had closed. Panic surged. I was trapped. The shadow filled the lantern room, the only escape route blocked by the hatch, and something fast and sharp was about to arrive directly beneath it. I couldn't stay here. The shadow felt like a passive, consuming void, but the clicking, scraping ascent felt actively predatory. Making a split-second decision, I lunged for the hatch handle. It was heavy iron, stiff from disuse. I wrenched it upwards. It didn't budge. Clack clack scrape. Directly below the hatch now. With adrenaline-fueled strength, I heaved again. The hatch groaned, lifted a few inches, then slammed back down. Something was obstructing it from below. No, it felt like sheer weight and rusted hinges. Ignoring the whispering shadow that seemed to swirl closer in the darkness behind me, I put my shoulder under the handle and pushed with all my might. Metal shrieked against metal. The hatch lifted, higher this time, enough for me to potentially squeeze through. Just as I prepared to drop into the blackness of the stairwell, something struck the underside of the hatch with incredible force. Bang! The metal buckled slightly. Then again, bang! Followed by a rapid, furious clicking, like a dozen angry crabs trapped in a metal bucket. It knew I was trying to escape. There was no choice. Praying the thing below couldn't immediately reach through the gap, I threw the hatch fully open and launched myself feet first into the pitch-black stairwell. I didn't aim for the steps, just dropped, hoping to catch the railing or land crumpled on a lower flight. My boots slammed onto stone steps perhaps 10 feet below, my knees buckling violently. Pain shot up my legs, but I was down, out of the lantern room. Above me, the hatch remained open, a rectangle of slightly less impenetrable blackness against the perfect void where the shadow resided. Click click click. The sound was horrifyingly close now, just a few steps below me on the stairs. I couldn't see anything in the absolute darkness of the shaft. Scrambling desperately, guided only by the feel of the railing and the curve of the wall, I started stumbling downwards. My hand brushed something cold, segmented, and sharp. It recoiled instantly with another dry clack. I hadn't just heard it below me, I had touched part of it. It was right there. A chaotic scrabbling erupted around me in the dark. Multiple limbs. Sharp points clicked against the metal railing, the stone steps, frighteningly close to my face. I swung blindly with my fist, connecting with something hard and chitinous. A furious hiss answered me, and something sharp grazed my arm, tearing fabric and skin. I didn't try to fight. I just kept moving down, half falling, half sliding, using the railing to guide my descent. The clicking, scrabbling pursuit stayed right with me, sometimes below, sometimes seemingly beside or even above me on the spiral. How many were there? Or was it just one thing, impossibly fast and multi-limbed? Finally, my fumbling hand found the familiar shape of my quarters doorknob. Wrenching it open, I threw myself inside, slamming the door shut and fumbling for the bolt in the darkness. It slid home with a heavy thunk. I collapsed against the door, gasping for air, listening. The chaotic clicking and scraping continued on the stairs outside for a moment, then seemed to hesitate right outside my door. A soft probe against the wood, then silence. Had it given up? Or was it merely waiting? My arms stung where it had been grazed. My legs ached from the fall. I was back in my small, circular prison, but the tower's defenses felt utterly breached. The light was gone. The horn was silent. And now, unknown entities roamed the stairs, while the consuming shadow occupied the peak, and the source of the impossible hum potentially stirred anew in the depths of level 0. I was utterly isolated, surrounded by encroaching horrors, with only a flimsy knife and dwindling hope. The protocols had failed, or perhaps Fletcher and I had failed them. The silence outside my door stretched on, feeling less like peace and more like the held breath before a final, fatal strike. Time became meaningless in the bolted darkness of my quarters. I sat on the floor, back pressed against the door, the small knife clutched uselessly in my hand, straining to hear anything over the frantic thumping of my own heart and the distant, mournful cry of the wind. The clicking, scraping presence on the other side of the door remained utterly silent. Was it gone? Had it descended again? Or was it merely waiting with inhuman patience? The absolute darkness was unnerving. Without the rhythmic sweep of the main lamp filtering down, the tower felt truly dead, a hollow stone shell adrift in the night. The faint embers in the stove had died, leaving no comforting glow. My grazed arm throbbed dully, a reminder of the sharp, chitinous thing I'd encountered on the stairs. Slowly, cautiously, I pushed myself to my feet. My legs still felt shaky from the fall. I needed light. There were supposed to be emergency lanterns, according to the revised rules Charles and I had seen tacked up yesterday. Rule 20, in case of power failure, use only the emergency lanterns provided in the utility closet. But the utility closet was downstairs, near the main entrance on level 1. Getting there meant traversing the pitch-black spiral staircase, potentially past whatever lurked outside my door. And the power hadn't failed, technically. The generator was still running, I could feel its faint, deep rumble distinct from the sea. Only the main lamp had been extinguished by the shadow entity. Would the emergency lanterns even work? Or was their use restricted for a reason, perhaps attracting unwanted attention just as the main lamp had? My thoughts snagged on the generator. It powered the tower's systems, the lamp rotation mechanism, still whirring uselessly above, the radio, the basic lights on each level, which hadn't come on, perhaps only activated by a switch downstairs. If the generator failed, the tower would be truly inert. Was that better or worse? A memory surfaced, Silas, the ferryman. Generator instructions are on the panel. Fletcher's log, generator acting up. Needs new filter. The generator room was adjacent to the main storage on the ground floor, level 1. Near the forbidden level 0 door. Near the main hatch where the pale climber had entered. It felt like the most dangerous place in the tower right now. Then, subtly at first, it began again. The low hum. Not the intense, structure-shaking vibration from before, but a quieter, more insidious thrumming, seeping up from level 0. It was different this time, less raw power, more focused. Like a searching sonar pinging through the rock. And accompanying it, a return of the whispering. Faint, multi-layered, seeming to curl around the edges of the humming sound, coming not just from below, but from the very walls around me. As if the stone itself was murmuring. Panic seized me again. I couldn't stay here. The silence had been terrifying, but this felt worse, like the tower was actively listening, probing. I had to move, create light, do something. The emergency lanterns were the only option. Taking several deep, steadying breaths, I cracked the door open just an inch, peering out into the black stairwell. Silence. No clicking, no scraping. Only the pervasive hum and the unsettling whispers that seemed to coalesce just beyond the edge of hearing. Holding the knife before me, I slipped out of the room, leaving the door unbolted, and began the terrifying descent. Each step on the metal spiral stairs echoed unnaturally loud in the narrow shaft. The humming intensified as I moved lower, the whispers seeming to swirl around me, tugging at my senses. My flashlight beam cut a weak, trembling circle on the steps ahead, revealing nothing but empty stairs winding down into blackness. Reaching the ground floor felt like entering another world. The humming was a palpable force here, vibrating the air, making the metal fuel drums in the storage area resonate faintly. The whispers were louder, almost coherent words just slipping away before I could grasp them. My flashlight beam swept across the galley, undisturbed. Across the storage area, fuel drum secure. Across the main door hatch, still closed, seemingly intact from the inside. Then, the level 0 door. Still bolted. The faint metallic smell was stronger here, almost overpowering the scent of brine and oil. The stone floor near the threshold looked darker. Wetter. My light lingered on the spot where I'd found the chitinous shard. The faint dampness I'd seen on the wall near the fuel drum seemed mirrored here, on the floor, a dark, oily patch spreading slightly from beneath the forbidden door. My stomach churned. Ignoring it, I located the utility closet, a narrow door tucked beside the main generator housing. Unlocking it revealed shelves stocked with cleaning supplies, spare bulbs, and, thankfully, 2 heavy-duty emergency lanterns. I flicked the switch on one. A bright, steady beam of white light flooded the closet, pushing back the oppressive darkness. Relief washed through me, potent and immediate. Light felt like a weapon now. Carrying the lit lantern, I stepped back out into the main ground floor area. The bright beam cut through the gloom, casting sharp, dancing shadows. The humming and whispering seemed to recede slightly in the lantern's glare, as if momentarily repelled. I needed the second lantern. Keeping the first one aimed towards the level 0 door, I reached back into the closet for the other. As my fingers closed around its handle, something behind me shifted. A faint click. Not the sharp clicking from the stairs. This was softer, closer. Coming from the shadows near the fuel drums. I froze, lantern beam still fixed on the level 0 door. Slowly, heart pounding, I began to turn, sweeping the light across the storage area. Drums, shelves, spare parts, dark corner. 2 pinpricks of red light glowed back at me from the deepest shadow, low to the ground. Reflecting the lantern light like an animal's eyes. But no animal I knew had eyes that glowed with that internal, malevolent crimson. As I watched, paralyzed, the eyes blinked, slowly. And the pale climber unfolded itself from the shadows it had been crouched in. It rose silently, impossibly tall and gaunt, its broken neck clicking as its head swiveled to fix those empty, glowing sockets directly on me. It hadn't left. It had gotten inside somehow, perhaps through that oily seepage, and it had been waiting. It raised one long, skeletal finger and pointed, not at me, but past me, towards the still-bolted level 0 door, and its lipless mouth stretched into a silent, horrifying grin. The pale climber's grin stretched impossibly wide, a rictus of bone and shadow in the stark lantern light. Its glowing red eyes fixed on me, but its long, skeletal finger remained pointed unwaveringly at the bolted level 0 door. It wasn't just acknowledging the presence below, it felt like an accusation, or an instruction. My mind reeled. Was this thing warning me? Or was it trying to direct me towards a greater horror, using me as a pawn? Its earlier whispers about Fletcher, the protocols, the horn, it suggested an intelligence, a malevolent awareness. Before I could process further, the low hum from level 0 surged back, louder and more insistent than ever. The dark, oily patch on the floor beneath the door visibly pulsed, spreading rapidly across the stone like spilled ink. The whispers intensified, no longer indistinct murmurs but sharp, sibilant voices overlapping, clawing at the edges of comprehension, speaking in a language that felt fundamentally wrong. The level 0 door itself began to vibrate violently, the heavy iron bolts groaning under unimaginable strain from the other side. Dust and mortar showered down from the doorframe. The pale climber recoiled at the escalating noise, letting out that high-pitched, static-filled hiss I'd heard on the stairs. Its glowing red eyes darted frantically between me, the vibrating door, and the spiral staircase leading upwards. It seemed terrified of whatever was about to emerge from below. In that instant, I understood. The climber wasn't the primary threat, not right now. It was trapped with me, cornered by the awakening power in level 0. Its attempts to get my attention, its presence outside my door, perhaps even the tapping on the lantern glass, maybe it had been trying to warn me, or seek refuge. Or perhaps it merely saw me as a potential tool, or a distraction for the thing below. Boom! A deafening impact struck the level 0 door from within. The thick oak shuddered violently, one of the massive iron bolts tearing partially free from the stone, showering splinters. Boom! Another impact, stronger this time. The door bulged inwards, cracks spiderwebbing across its surface. The remaining bolts groaned, metal screeching in protest. It wouldn't hold much longer. The pale climber shrieked, a sound of pure, unadulterated terror, no longer directed at me but at the imminent breach. Abandoning all pretense of communication or threat, it scrambled with impossible speed, not towards me, but towards the spiral staircase, its only escape route upwards, away from the horror about to be unleashed. It moved like a panicked insect, its spindly limbs blurring as it darted past the generator, heading for the stairs I had just descended. My path was blocked. I had maybe seconds before the door gave way entirely. Trapped on the ground floor, between the fleeing climber blocking the stairs and the monstrous pressure building behind the level 0 door. There was nowhere to run. My eyes darted around the room, illuminated by the steady glare of the emergency lantern. Fuel drums, galley, main hatch. The main hatch. Outside. Into the cold, dark sea wind. It felt insane, suicidal even, to contemplate going outside with whatever lurked in the water, but it was the only direction left. Just as the climber reached the base of the stairs, the level 0 door exploded inwards with a final, deafening crash. Wood, iron, and stone flew across the room. The lantern beam sliced through the settling dust, revealing not just an opening, but a roiling abyss of perfect darkness within the frame, a darkness that seemed to absorb the light. And from that absolute blackness, accompanied by a deafening surge of the discordant hum and a cacophony of whispers, something began to emerge. Not scrabbling, not climbing, but flowing. A wave of glistening, black ichor, thick and viscous, surged out from the doorway, spreading across the stone floor with unnatural speed, instantly engulfing the area where the climber had stood moments before. The climber shrieked again as the ichor washed over its pale feet, then scrambled frantically up the first few steps of the spiral staircase, desperate to escape the rising tide. I didn't wait to see more. Turning, I lunged for the main door hatch handle, dropping the second lantern, wrenching the heavy lever. It resisted for a heart-stopping moment, then gave way with a groan. Cold, wet air blasted my face as the hatch swung open, revealing the churning gray waves crashing against the rocks just feet below. Escape. But as I stepped onto the threshold, ready to leap onto the narrow, slick platform outside, a sound froze me in place. Not from the ichor flooding the room behind me. Not from the climber scrabbling up the stairs. It came from outside. From the swirling mist over the dark water. A faint, melodic singing. Hauntingly beautiful, yet filled with an unbearable sorrow. The same sound Fletcher had logged. Coming from the sea. And it was getting closer. I stood paralyzed in the open doorway. Behind me, a tide of impossible blackness rose from the depths, consuming the base of the tower. Before me, the cold, indifferent sea offered not escape, but the source of an ethereal, beckoning, and deeply unnerving song.